Доброго дня, шановні колеги.
Good morning, dear colleagues. We begin one more press conference. It's a joint project of Free Crimea and Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. And the topic of our discussion is culture beyond Crimea. And participants of our press conference are known in cultural and in other spheres. And the activity was related to Crimea, to welcome Liliya, Mlinarych, president of the Koktebel Jazz Fest, and one of the music brands, not only Crimea and Ukraine, and it's great that this brand continues to live, in difference to fake festival. Crimea Jazz Party and occupants were trying to organize without any success. Also, we have Andriy Shchekun, who is the chairman of the Crimean Center for Business and Cultural Cooperation, Ukrainian House, and Yurash, who is the director of Department on Religious and Nationalities and the Ministry of Justice, Culture of Ukraine. So this press conference, as I underlined, is dedicated to the issues about culture beyond Crimea. And as you understand well, the situation in cultural and with museums, with music in occupied Crimea is in the focus of attention, not only of Ukrainian experts, but also that's about international experts, and we have it on infographics. On this slide, you see information about the signals about massive abuse of human rights in occupied Crimea. They are done by representatives of the most noticed by many organizations, international organizations, UN, Freedom House, the Council of Europe, etc. Once again, this is official statistics of Ukrainian government. The number of IDPs registered from Crimea and from Sevastopol is more than 20,000 people. Though, according to alternative data of our center, we have them more than 50,000 because the majority of them they don't get registered. Here's statistics, and that was prepared by our experts, and it's about the number of religious organizations that were registered in occupied Crimea. You see that, for example, under Ukraine, there were religious communities. We had 2,083 of them, and in a year, in fact, on March 1, 2015, according to new Russian law, only 14 of such religions are there. The 163 applications were sent, and only 33 were re-registered. One more number, it's about the number of museums and that existed and worked in Crimea. Unfortunately, we don't have information from the Ministry of Russian Federation, but we can use the data before occupation. In 2012, the number of people who visited museums in Crimea, there were 34 such museums and 5 in Sevastopol. So visitors of museum, there were 2,482,000 people, and in Sevastopol there were museums were visited by 1,020,000 people. And then data about the number of tourists that in Crimea and in Sevastopol. You see that in peak 2012 and 6,134,000 people went for recreations, and then 5 million in 2013, and there was a decline to 3 million, and those were mostly Russian tourists, only 400,000 from Ukraine, and they were mostly IDPs, refugees from Luhansk and Donetsk regions. what is happening in culture in Crimea, and we should must mention that at present the main document that regulates culture in Crimea, in Sevastopol, that is agreement of Russian Duma from January 27, federal law on legal regulation of relations in culture and tourism as to accepting to Russian Federation Crimea and new subjects of and Crimea and Sevastopol, federal status. Norms of this law puts norms on cultural values in Crimea and Sevastopol. What is the danger? What's the danger of these laws? And signed a year ago agreement between Hermitage from St. Petersburg and with museums and POCs in Crimea. That agreement signed by Crimea museums and Hermitage that allows illegal movement of a museum from funds of museums that tourist attraction as to expositions, etc. And then it will be expropriation of such museum funds. You know that there are several of such examples when Russian Federation is trying illegally to return expositions from Crimean museums, and there is an appeal of Russian Federation to the Nationalities because some property from Crimean museums and they were about to return to Ukrainian museums, but Dutch courts they stopped that movement, and the most massively that happened during Crimea War 1853 and also during the Civil War in the Russian Empire and the Second World War II. What is surprising, the museum funds is suffered because of Crimean War in of the 19th century. Russian authorities were able to take a lot of those of them, like a diorama of Sevastopol Museum during Crimean War. They damaged and looted museums, English and Turkish paratroopers in Crimean and Feodosia, and authentic museum in Kerch. It was destroyed. All the exhibition was taken out. And now the Russian Empire, no Soviet Union or Ukraine are trying to appeal such case. But coming back to this story, we understand that museum funds and cultural legacy of Crimea, and that was Koktebel just fest. I was a participant. I was happy because during 3 last years before the annexation, I was during the last even Koktebel just fest, and I remember how quickly that developed, and every year not only more tourists started to arrive, but more performers. And I remember the last the wonderful stage, and in my phone I still have a lot of pictures from that trip. That's why I give the floor. I'm pleased to give the floor to our famous culture activist Liliya Mlinarych, and who continues that tradition in Ukraine, and she will tell us and will help you for this region and for that festival to continue to exist until it goes back to Koktebel.
Thank you for the invitation and the interest shown by you in order that this fest continues to live. The fest, the Crimean, and all other names like just Koktebel are the trademarks, Ukraine trademark, and we use that trademark the world over, by the way, in the Russian Federation and in Ukraine. And I would like to say that the culture beyond the boundaries of Crimea definitely exists, and it has always been there and will stay here. And it was very important to us to conduct the same festival at the same time as usual in the Crimea. Why? Because always all the documents we used to have prepared by the December because there was a lot of papers we had to collect, the resolution of the village council separately, but everything we had all the necessary papers, and we had reached agreement with the musicians, and then happened what happened. And by the way, even those papers allowed us to conduct the Koktebel jazz party. They conducted the same during the same dates, the same place. Speaking about the Crimea, and that was the festival for the Crimea. That used to be what we call the event tourism. We were the first, together with the authorities of the Crimea, thought what to do within this very short resort period in the Crimea. It's really short, only 3 months, and this kind of festival arrangements, such kind of festival in September, meant extension of the resort season for 1 month. And actually, the last festival we had in the Crimea, we actually repeated the peak of the season. About 35,000 people would attend this festival in Koktebel. It was very easy to calculate, this figure, because we conducted in those days festival on the 20th of September, so that it has nothing to do with this resort period in the Crimea as a resort series. So as a Ukrainian brand, we already had a very good cooperation program with international institutions, and it was the festival 2013. For the first time ever in the Eastern Europe, it was supported by the British Council, the largest, let's say, sponsor organization, beneficial organization in Europe. They brought their one-day program where the best British collective new wave groups were presented. It was not only a great honor to us, it was very important for us that on the Ukrainian soil we could demonstrate those new names, which 1 or 2 years later became the new brands in the British music. And it seemed to us to a very correct road to embark on for the development of our village. If the village of Koktebel, by the way, it amounts to 30,000 people. In 2003, when there was the first festival was held that year, it was 1.5 million hryvnia. In 2013, the budget was 38 million hryvnia, including the active construction of hotels, the public catering outlets, whatever. Last year we are Ukrainian festival. Our public is Ukrainian public. We know that because we have the electronic sale of tickets. We know the statistics of sales. 80% of people attending that festival were the Ukrainian citizens, and understanding our public, we could not do anything in the Crimea. So that's why we moved it to Odessa. Beautiful beaches, no infrastructure. So we are talking about 2014, but we hope that we'll be able to do something about that. Anything else? Well, no, it was quite an emotional story. I have still many memories myself about Koktebel, and it's clear that Koktebel can be replaced only by another Koktebel. But I am sure, but the most important is not the place, not the site, but the people. And people who remain to be very well-known brand, they are going to, they will go to any place, where they're invited. We are talking about this, some kind of structure around this festival. That was really a very big event for the Crimea. I'm talking specifically about Koktebel village, and what that festival meant to the local citizens, local infrastructure. About 30,000 tourists came there for the last time. This was a large figure because the population, the number of the population there increased tenfold, as compared to the local residents. And now I give the floor to Andriy, because he suffered from the little green man, because he was abducted, and he then was forced to leave this peninsula of Crimea. And your ideas will be important. I would like to know what, in your opinion, has changed in those days.
Thank you. I'm not IDP, and they just swapped me, and they deported me. Having the contact with with the Crimeans, and a lot of them lose faith, and they have very bad thoughts that Ukraine left them, quit them. There is no support, and in the field of culture, the same. So the facts, concrete facts. For example, Museum of Hero of Ukraine, Roy, which is in Simferopol. You know that today in ethnographic museum, they took the shield and they put it on the window, and that whole collection of Vera Roy, it's a private collection, so it doesn't belong to Ukraine, or it doesn't belong to Russian Federation. It's not a public property, and there are some efforts of Russian Federation to take that private collection of Vera Heroic, and only one son cares about that, and he's in a hospital in Simferopol, as I understand. So there is a process. So there is nothing positive from Ukraine, any support, at least of private collections that are there. The same about children band Svitano, Alexander Petrushka. They set up that folk group in the 90s, and they participated in international competitions, and they got a lot of awards, and they also showed their concert to Ukraine. Now they are one-to-one with their problems, and I can make that list. And of course, we hope the IDPs from Crimea, we wanted to support them more, but we hope that in the Ministry of Culture of Ukraine, finally, there will be Crimean House will work. And there was a decision of the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine last May. And we know that in the budget they have 3.5 million hryvnia for that. But for long, this to develop it takes a lot of time to build a structure. And on May 18, there was a hearing in the committee of the parliament, and we gave some recommendations and to the Ministry of Culture, and there was a deputy minister as to the necessity to develop some mechanisms and some financial support of such people and activists, and in the civic center in Crimea, through civic institutions and that are here, and who know about those needs, about those problems, and they would like to participate in that process. And also, in my opinion, our state Krymska Svetlitsa newspaper is in a horrible situation, and it is not published anymore. People work just on enthusiasm that it should be reformatted into a cultural information publication. That because the way it is now, of course, that is quite dangerous for journalists of that newspaper, and that process should be. We should support them, and messages for Crimeans, we need to give them those messages all the time and systemically. The majority of Ukrainians in Crimea, and their cultural needs, if they have them, they go to a church. The only cultural life or uniting factor, that is the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Kiev Patriarchy, and they have some structures, and they took away some churches from them in Pereval and Sevastopol, and now they're trying to take that in Simferopol. They want to take land for them to build some structures, FSB, and with their needs and the number of people who come to the church, and 2-3 times more people come to the church than when Crimea was under Ukraine. within Ukraine. In my opinion, there should be an action plan. The system developed how to provide rights and freedoms of Crimeans on the occupied territory. That should be done today even. Thank you, Andriy. We have the director of the department on religion and nationalities, Andriy Yurash. And there were questions to you in that part, to which extent the ministry helps Ukrainians in Crimea and our citizens to realize their cultural rights. And Krymska Svetlica, I remember that publication, they started to publish it in the beginning of the 90s after the independence. And so what is anything done by the government, and also what does Ministry of Culture does for them? Good morning. It's a pleasure to be in such a society. Thank you for the information. There is a whole bunch of issues, and we can speak on different levels about the problems which we have because of the situation in Crimea. I will start with the answer, but please. You spoke about the Ukrainian House, the organization that was set up and started to function with the help of the Ministry of Culture, and our department got involved on all the stages to institutional building. But I would like to mention some general things, because in my opinion they are exclusively important in principle, just for us to understand the situation. And to answer in the context of those numbers you suggested, and to also to have a general understanding of the situation in Crimea. So Crimean House, organization that started to function, quite modest budget, 3.5 million hryvnia, and that was in the last year. Now we have to work on for next year. In the budget we should have an adequate number that would help to develop different activities of the state enterprise, which, by the way, because of interference and efforts of the Ministry of Culture to make it popular, and it has many forms of activity: culture, manager, and business. Even business, for the structure to be full-fledged, and on one hand we should work and think about the future budget, and on the other hand we need to think about, in this sense, that we are working about grants from the West and are involved to develop the work of that institution. One more issue, a conceptual one, related to Crimean House, and we should have a discussion of the concept of activity. The structure is registered. It has public support and governmental support. It has a statute. It has some financial opportunities, but the broader discussion on general Ukraine level, and with the participation of NGOs, what kind of functions it should have? Is it the structure that should work only to help Crimean Tatars or all people in Crimea? We need your active participation, and we should invite people of culture from different groups to develop the activity of that institution. From the very beginning, you showed 20,000 IDPs from Crimea. The number, on one hand, is big. On the other hand, if we to take the general numbers, is not big, but absolute majority of these 20,000 who registered as IDPs from Crimea, that's first of all about Crimean Tatars and partial Ukrainians probably. And if you take a statistic dimension of those two ethnic groups in Crimea, that's a big percentage, and in that sense we understand it. That now the activity of many Crimean Tatars and ethnic and religious organizations is moved to mainland Ukraine, and that's why the initiative of the ministry, and with the support of our department, On May 18, we organized activities to celebrate the 71 years anniversary of deportation of Crimean Tatars from the peninsula. Likewise, there are on the stage of discussion and introduction of media projects of Crimean Tatars, and Crimean Tatars TV started on man-laid started to work, and religious structures started to integrate into existing in Ukrainian religious organizations, or they found new. And 2 weeks ago in Lviv, they opened Islam Culture Center, and they have a new Crimean Tatars community in that city, which organized during the last year. They are trying to organize Muslim communities in the city and to turn into that center into a very powerful center of cultural religious related to Western Ukraine, and also it will be important for the whole Ukraine. In that sense, there are two big centers in Kiev of Muslims of Ukraine, and they are working with the Crimean Tatars IDPs, and they're trying to provide them any assistance, and starting with the help of volunteers, material support, and up to assistance in a sense of finding a job, documents, etc., and finding a job for them. A very important point is assessment of. It's about religious organizations in Crimea. 2,000 or more than 2,000 in 2014. More than half of the Muslim communities in Crimea. The data of Russian Federation, which they gave to UNESCO as an assessment, they speak about 1,000. So officially, there is no official statistics about religious organizations in Crimea, but unofficially, no, we have statistics here. This on Iman, we had 163 and were applied, and 33 got registered. I speak according to Russian statistics about 1,000. Why such a quick reduction among 1,000 of Muslim communities? About 600 didn't have state registration. Ukrainian legislation allows religious communities to, according to European trends, to function with others. Russian legislation a priori excludes such an opportunity. So 600 disappear. There were about 600 Protestant communities without registration, but we had them in our statistics. The task, which was not a result on the basis of these numbers, absolute minority were able to pass through registration according to Russian laws. There are two problems, and as Andriy mentioned, there are a lot of from religious organizations they don't want to do, because that's a very complicated process according to Russian legislation. They lose everything, all opportunities compared to what Ukrainian legislation provided to them. And the second difficult process in this field of registration in Russian Federation, and that's why they registered only 12 organizations, and but that is the issue to be discussed internationally, because this is the issue of human rights and preservation of that level of freedoms and opportunities for self-regulation that Ukraine guaranteed for every religious community. They are exempt of that, and the statement of the Commissar of OSCE on national minorities are told she cannot get to Crimea for 2 years, and she cannot make a report, and she cannot see the situation directly. She states about that. As really, how religious organizations deal with registration differently. 3 epochs of Moscow Patriarchy in the they sent the statutes to Russian re-registration. We don't have final variants of those statutes, and there was a scandal on media on publishing several previous versions. We don't know how true that is, but the fact is that logic shows that those. I beg your pardon. We need to switch the two questions, and I tried to outline the general picture of religious life there.
The Ukrainian Crisis Media Center has a very busy day, so we have to wrap up. So please introduce yourself and who you ask your question, address your question. My question is to the representative Minister of Culture of Ukraine. I would like to hear the specific answer to the question how the Minister of Culture of Ukraine is going to support Ukrainian citizens in Crimea, in particular the theatrical studio Svitanak, which is Dawn, and how would like to how to visualize the resolution of the problem of the private collection of real work and unique collection of the embroidered blouses, and how are you going to support the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Kiev Patriarchy. I would like to focus on the last aspect. There are different trends in the Ministry of Culture directions with different programs. Of course, I do not want to let's say to try to go away from your questions, but actually we create everything possible to preserve different cultural aspects, and we try to support the cultural values in Crimea to a certain extent where we can implement it from Ukraine, and sometimes to move those projects to the continental Ukraine. Speaking about the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Kiev Patriarchy, this is really a very topical issue, discussed at every level. The priest Vladimir actually addressed the international community, trying to explain the realities he found himself in. And on the part of the Ukrainian authority, there is the understanding. We actually recognize this in the registration of Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Kiev Patriarchy, which is a legitimate, this recognized church. We cannot, the fact that we cannot exercise control about everything which is going on there, actually forces the head of the church to act accordingly. Andriy already mentioned that 16 communities which functioned before that. Now we have 8 or 9 which continue to exist, and now there is such a desire and the need to move this problem to the international plane and to try to resolve it with the help of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I would like to add that about 1.5 months ago we had the press conference with leaders of different religious communities, including the Protestants and Ukrainian Orthodox Church or Kiev Patriarchy, etc. All the issues regarding the statistics which were mentioned at this press conference were submitted to the Deputy State Secretary of State of the United States, Robert Brzezinski, who was at that time in Kiev. Moreover, I'm going to voice all those information data. I'm going to have the floor during our meeting in Brussels with the representatives of the European Parliament, and there will be a lot of representatives of our information about our community who are subject to great pressure, and what pertains to the let's say to the pastors of Protestant churches, which are forced to move the Crimea, and they are replaced by the Russian colleagues. So it's a tragic history. Even the Crimean Tatars do not have such tragedy now as the Protestants have in the Kiev Patriarchy. The situation is very difficult. Again, the situation with the Muslims also is not that easy. and there was kind of Tavre moved here. That was a real project, but it did not meet with the support. It failed, but actually that was the mechanism, provocation on part of FSB of Russia, in the sense that we have to understand this particular, partial at least, in the spiritual, actually, establishment of the Muslims of Crimea, and they re-registered of the Crimean Sevastopol under the Russian Federation, and this year they are going to carry out the Hajj under the auspices of the Russian Federation. We know about that. Just try to increase the quotas for Hajj, which is going to be financed from the Russian state budget and from the extra budgetary foundations of funds. They try to make them more loyal to the Russian Federation this way. More questions, please. Alexei Kushnir. The what pre-selling publication is. Could you provide me more accurate figures in infographic? It became, now we have 14, and the registration was done for 33. Well, I can understand really those figures. Microphone, please. Microphone. Sorry. Once again, this figure 14, this new religious organizations registered from scratch, so to say. 33 were re-registered from 409 officially registered. 163 are those applications which have not been yet considered or satisfied. Do you have any real levers or ways to finance or to provide any other assistance or aid to some cultural organizations in the Crimea, maybe of international nature or something like that? Are there any opportunity or possibility to do that, to render assistance to the Ukrainian Cultural Center organized by some activists in the Crimea? Well, this question should not address to myself. I can answer the questions pertaining to religion or nationalities or ethnic groups. But once again, I repeat myself, with the same purpose of mind, in order to implement this kind of support, we organized this Crimean House. It has its own levers of both formal and informal support. Speaking about the statute of the Crimean House, all those mechanisms are inherent there. Maybe I can specify a bit. In order to help the cultural organization in the Crimea, they also have to go through certain procedures. You know this law on foreign agents. When you go through this registration, only after that, you can officially act and get the assistance from Ukraine as well, Ukrainian organizations. As far as I know, this procedure is very much cumbersome and complicated in the Crimea. And naturally, we cannot talk about some official assistance to be given to the Ukrainian organizations or any international organizations which are very much interested in this assistance. We just cannot even talk about that because they are not registered, and we know why, because those people work and live in absolutely under different conditions. For example, if you want to remain the director of the museum in the Crimea, you have to take the Russian Federation citizenship. If you do that, you have to follow the laws of those people who came to rule there. And so this is very difficult. In my opinion, what we can do in this respect, without Ministry of Culture, sorry to say that, but we've been existing for 13 years now, and it has always been a private initiative. If we are talking about the same Maximilian Voloshin museum, and we were created not to help the jazz music, but this too, we decided the Koktebel. This is not geographical space. This is the world of music and creation. So we are going to organize the Days of Crimean Culture, and we are working with the First National TV channel. We are talking about and thinking about that. We would like to introduce the Days of the Crimean Culture. Thank you, Liliya. More questions if you have? If none, then we'll give a chance to our participants to sum up our discussion. We deviated from the topic of culture. We started to talk about religion. And I would like to talk about cultural aspects, first of all, because Crimea is a unique place from the point of view of culture in the territory of Ukraine and diverse of ethnic cultures, in addition to Russian, Ukrainian, Crimean, Tatar culture. Let us not forget that was also his motherland, a land inhabited in the earlier times by Greeks, by Italian community, by the immigrants from the Sicily island. And they actually preserved their surnames. For example, I have a friend, Sasha Kardana. Kardana is actually the very popular family name or second name in the Sicily. In this community today, they still speak Italian, and their number is about 800 people. So from the point of view of the cultural religious, this is a unique area on the map of Ukraine. So just 1-2 minutes. In the context of modern problems faced by Ukraine today, it's natural the national and religious issues are of utmost importance, both in the east of Ukraine and in the context of the Crimean problems. And then speaking about culture, we could not touch upon those aspects as well. Actually, there were the essential issues. We are talking about those problems which we covered today in the Crimea. I believe those issues are close to national identity, national security. We have to bring them to a certain level of discussion, which has been done already. We had some hearings in Verkhovna Rada, and within the frameworks of new laws adopted regarding the status of the Crimean Tatar people, Karaims, etc., etc. Something has been done already, but we have some systemic work, joint efforts, and in this context, the opinion of the public must be very important, consultative, kind of helping us in order for us to respond and even to monitor the situation. Because sorry, but there are just a few real reserves in order to follow the situation in the Protestant and whatever the Crimea, and generally speaking, to assess the situation in this peninsula. Thank you very much again for the invitation extended to us. We'll try. I already mentioned that we plan to hold the Day of the Crimean Culture, so we are expecting everybody, invite everybody to come to Zatoka near Odessa in August, and we are going to continue to acquaint Ukraine with different things. We have a virtual tour of the House Museum of Maximilian Voloshin. So also please do not forget about Crimean culture and the Monument of Culture, which is located in Crimea, which continue to believe to be Ukrainian. Ukraine maybe did not do a lot or hasn't done a lot for this, but they were doing something. So we did some help extend to us for this House Museum Voloshin, and we continue to organize this kind of tours both in Ukraine and beyond its boundaries. So I invite everybody to join us and work together with us over those different projects. We are going to have this kind of a week in the end of August, August 23, August 30, and we are going to have a discussion, war and culture. And sorry, I would like to thank all Ukrainian musicians, wonderful musicians who helped us to hold this festival last year. Jamal and Chabracha, their first stage, they remember that they had the Koktebel Jazz Festival. So they came here once again and helped us to hold this festival. And Ivan Semisyuk presented the style of this festival again. Ivan Semisyuk style will be present today, this year as well. And thanks to all Ukrainian citizens who supported us in that. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for this event, for this press conference. I would like to note, first of all, thank to the Minister of Culture for the fact that they heard us, and also the public at large, and our organization and the Crimean organizations are prepared for communication and cooperation. I'm not going to advertise here what we are doing for the organizations to stay in the Crimea. We support of those on a continuous basis, and we have the possibility to use the help of international guarantors. And start from the scratch, we continue our work. And you know that we heard the message that Minister of Culture is prepared to extend the helping hand to us, and we know how to support these studios with Dawn, what kind of cultural events should be organized so that the people, children, students had an opportunity to attend such wonderful functions which will be staged either in the Odessa region or in Carpathians. So we would like to have this fruitful cooperation with these public bodies and organs. Thanks to Andriy, Liliya and Andriy for their participation in our discussion. This has been most interesting event. All the information about this conference will be on this website of the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. We are developing further on. We have more and more people who join us, and we know that a lot of people reading our information in the Crimea and the city of Sebastopol. We are going to preserve the names, historical names, and in 2 weeks we are going, in 2 weeks on Thursday we are going to talk within the Project Free Crimea. We are going to talk about the occupation of Crimea. Thanks again.